The next item on our agenda is departmental item number 1. Would the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart and members of the board, departmental item number 1 is from the County Executive Office. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding a coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 update.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Dorneso.
Briefing topics for today. First, I will go over the SBC COVID-19 data, then proceed to the blueprint for a safer economy, as well as covering school waivers, and then Mr. Gazzoni will do the last point, the AB 3088. Santa Barbara County COVID-19 by the numbers. We have, as of yesterday, a total of 8,930 cases with 8,669 total recovered cases. We still have 151 active cases, which means that these 150 cases are still infectious. We have 23 currently in the hospital. We have a total of 110 deaths, and our death rate is 1.2%. Over the past week, we are seeing, again, a decreasing trend in many of our regions. Noteworthy is the decrease in Santa Maria and Lompoc. We are seeing a slight uptick in Goleta, IV, Santa Ynez, and North County unincorporated. Again, with our hospitalization, we are following the state trend with a hospitalization rate decreasing at a rate of 44%. Our med-surg rates decreased by 30%, and our ICU rates decreased 71% during this time period. I'm sorry, can you hear me clearly? Or? Oh, okay, I'll just take this
You
off.
have a mask on.
And now the blueprint for a safer economy. Just a quick reminder of the tier system. The purple tier is the widespread tier, and it is the tier 1. Substantial disease transmission is tier 2, and that is known as the red. Moderate tier is tier 3, and minimal tier is tier 4. So I want to just pause and note that for the red tier, the substantial tier, the ideal is new cases per day. The 4 to 7 new cases per 100,000 population per day with a 7-day average and 7-day lag translates to 18 to 31 new cases per day. So that's our goal. Good news. This week's tier assignment for the week of September 6th to September 12th, our new metrics, we did get 6.5 for the new cases per day. It was adjusted, so the final case rate is 6.7, and our positivity rate is in the orange range at 4.3. However, because this is we need to be in the purple tier with advanced metrics of 2 weeks before we can move to the red.
You meant the red tier, right?
Yes, did I?
It's okay.
The red tier, yes. So as you recall, our first tier assignment, our case rate, adjusted case rate was 8.3. Last week was 9.1, and we are downward trending to 6.7 this week. Our testing positivity, we started 3 weeks ago at 5.93, moved to 4.80, and ending with 4.3 this week. So what does this mean for us? So we have 1 week's worth of credit for being in the red. To the county needs 2 consecutive prior weeks of less restrictive metrics to move. So if our county meets the red metrics next week, we would move to red tier on 9/29. And Santa Barbara County needs to be officially assigned to the red tier for 14 days before K through 12 schools can open, and that would be on October 13th. However, during the waivers process can still happen. I want to do a quick reminder about the current transmission of cases in our county. So as you can see, 39% of our cases acquired the infection through close contact, 25% acquired it through community interactions, with 35% unknown. So 99%. With travel, with only 12 cases, 0. And we have about 1% that we are investigating. So what this means is that we want to remind everyone that there are very concrete ways to avoid the spread of COVID-19. What is safe is dinner at home, playing in your yard, family game night, going for a drive, group video chat with family and friends, going for a family hike, walking the dog. We would strongly advise community members to be cautious by at least keeping 6 feet between themselves and others, washing hands frequently with soap and water, or using hand sanitizers, or wearing a mask when engaging in the following activities: visiting a grocery store, picking up medications, picking up and delivery of food, using mass transit, dining outdoors at a restaurant. And we strongly recommend people avoiding group gatherings, visitors in your home, sleepovers, play dates, backyard barbecues with friends, shopping with friends, visiting with family not from your household, playing in the park with people not from your household, and going to work in a non-essential capacity. School waivers. We have 20 schools that have been approved by the local health department and concurred by CDPH, and these include I'll just read the last 3. Friday, Dunn School, Our Lady of Mount Carmel School, and Notre Dame School. So these are the 3 newest schools to be approved. We currently have 1 school that we sent to CDPH for concurrence, and that is St. Louis de Montfort. We are providing technical assistance and awaiting additional information from Blockman, Santa Ynez Valley Charter School, La Purísima Concepcion, Manzanita Public Charter School, and Carpinteria Unified Elementary School. And we do have 1 new submission, and that's from the Los Olivos Elementary School. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Gazzoni to present the next slide. Oh.
Is there a little mouse for this?
That is the mouse.
Yeah.
I think she's
I need a little mouse. Thank you. So I can click on it. Okay, thank you. Good morning. On August 31st, the governor approved and filed Assembly Bill 3088 that took effect immediately, and also states that it is retroactive. Assembly Bill 3088 has 2 broad areas of legislative changes. The first is referred to as the Homeowner Act, which primarily involves procedures that a mortgage servicer must follow if the borrower asserts that financial hardship from COVID-19 prevented them from making timely mortgage payments. The part that I'll be talking more about today is the COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act of 2020, or the Tenant Act, which is the second half of 3088. The Tenant Act places significant limits on landlords using the eviction remedy against residential tenants who did not pay their rent because of the COVID-19 emergency. Within AB 3088's Tenant Act, there is a preemption against extension of Santa Barbara County's own prohibition ordinance against evictions. Santa Barbara County's present ordinance provides protection where the failure to pay rent involves a substantial loss of income or substantial medical expenses from the COVID-19 emergency. The county code provision now will expire on September 30th, 2020. Although Santa Barbara County Code's provision applied to both residential and commercial leases, the state's Tenant Act does not apply to commercial tenants. The Tenant Act really divides the world into three buckets of time: non-payment of rent before March 1st, 2020, non-payment of rent between March 1st, 2020 and August 31st, 2020, and then September 1st, 2020 through January 31st, 2021. The Tenant Act provides additional eviction protections for non-payment of rent in the last of these two periods, those after March 1st, but generally not for non-payment of rent that became due before March 1st, 2020. I'll have an easy-to-follow guide here in a moment. The Tenant Act does not relieve tenants from their rent obligation, but only provides that unpaid rent because of defined COVID-19 related financial distress cannot be the basis for an eviction. But that protection against eviction is subject to its own rules and deadlines. Those rules are pretty hard to follow in 3088 itself, but the good news is that the Legal Aid Foundation of Santa Barbara County assembled an easy-to-follow webpage about COVID-19 resources, COVID-19 and evictions. And that webpage, as I will tour with you, also links to clear, frequently asked questions from the state and clear tenant protection guidelines from the state. So we are now looking at Legal Aid Foundation's parent webpage, and a quick shout out for Legal Aid Foundation, who was available to us when these questions started arising over the weekend. Their executive director, Jennifer Smith, was very helpful with us, and we did not need to invent a new wheel because one exists. So when one looks at the Legal Aid Foundation's webpage, you can see COVID-19 resources across the top. That's what we're in right now. If you scroll down a little ways, you'll see some other, easier to see at home maybe than on the screen, but there are two other links. There are two other links. One of them has the words "like the Tenant Relief Act," and if you just click on that and have a computer slightly faster than the county's, you will be led to the state's frequently asked questions about the Tenant Act. And this is a pretty good discussion in here, although the pointer is not working. You can see this breakdown of the two time groups, March 1st to August 31st, as I take the mouse across there, cursor, and then September 1st to January 31st. So you have several pages of, I think, pretty clearly worded FAQs. If that doesn't do it for you, and you go back to their main page, and then go down to this section that has the words "information here" next to the state of California, and click on that, you then get these pretty clearly worded tenant protection guidelines, which talks about noticing and what you need to do to protect your rights if you're going to assert COVID-19 as a defense. And then as you scroll down through this particular document, towards the end, right near the bottom, there's a fact sheet that's available in both English and Spanish. which will come up any moment now. Here we are. This is the Spanish version of the fact sheet, which basically takes some of the same information and puts it more into a narrative form and lists the critical dates and what one must do to assert these protections, and discusses dates like February 21st, 2021, when a lot of these protections will no longer be available. So I found this website from Legal Aid Foundation to be extremely helpful, and whichever reading style you prefer to use, there's a way to get into it, either for FAQs, tenant protection guidelines, or the parent website itself, where we started, right here, on COVID-19 resources. In addition to Legal Aid Foundation's webpage, the California Apartment Association also has information available. As their name implies, California Apartment Association primarily serves owners and landlords, but I thought that their webpage was helpful. Their webpage is available at caanet.org/AB3088/bar. caanet.org/AB3088/bar. That includes an 11-minute YouTube video and a PowerPoint. So I think these resources should help both tenants and landlords. There are some critical dates coming up in September for landlords in terms of noticing, and 3088 provides clear language of what has to go into that notice. And if you're a landlord, the California Apartment Association's webpage has some pretty easy to follow guidelines. Ready for any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Gazzoni. This is really helpful. I want to appreciate the fact that you highlighted the work of the Legal Aid Foundation and Jennifer Smith in providing this information to tenants, making that easy and accessible. And as you said, I think the Legal Aid Foundation's website is LAF, as in Frank, SBC.org. Supervisor Hartman.
Yes, I had a question. If there is a dispute about the inability to pay arising from COVID, what are the procedures to resolve that?
Well, the typical lawyer answer will follow, and that is, it depends. It depends in part as to which time frame we're talking about, in that for the first time frame, actually the middle time frame, the first protected time frame, March 1st through 2020 through August 31st, all that the tenant is required to do is to provide the declaration of the COVID-19 emergency being the cause of their inability to pay. For the second time frame, September 1st through January 31st, the landlord can ask for more information on that. Ultimately, this will end up in front of probably the small claims court for an adjudication as to whether the asserted reason is viable or not. 3088 goes through some of the factors, whether it's a high medical expenses, loss of job, that would work under either of these two date categories.
And are small claims courts open?
Small claims courts have had their jurisdiction extended to handle cases even of multi-month rent that might not ordinarily be available. Our local superior court is still opening different portions of it, starting with the criminal process. But none of these cases were going to be litigated for several months based on the delays that are built into 3088.
Supervisor Williams?
I was on the impression that one of the time periods had a bifurcation between low income and higher income folks, and that the higher income folks had to provide documentation, the lower income folks only had to do the declaration. Which time period is that?
That would be the third time period, September 1st through 2020 through January 31st, and that is that this is one of the harder to work through sets of rules, but if the landlord believes that the tenant is a defined high income tenant, which is linked to the local income, they can request additional information on that. There are also some prohibitions on what the landlord cannot ask for on that. And again, we would expect to see some of this show up when it gets to court. I think if you're a landlord, I would recommend reading or watching the California Apartment Association's website and paying scrupulous attention to what has to go into the notice that you're required to provide your tenants.
Other questions for Mr. Gazzoni or Dr. Del Reynoso?
I've got one for Dr. Reynoso.
Supervisor
Let me know.
Lavanino.
Thank you. Just curious, on our website, we've always had rate tracking information. As we've progressed through this pandemic, the reporting's got more and more and more in depth. But now we're actually tracking some numbers. The numbers that are really preventing us from moving from one tier to the next are not, to my knowledge, tracked on the website now. So we have a lot of information, which is all great information, but it's not really the key numbers that we need to track. And so I'm just curious if there's a way to, just for the public to be able to go on and see, on a daily basis, kind of where we are, or is it because we only track it once a week? I mean, if we just had the weekly number up there, I think it would be helpful. But I know there's a lot of information on there, but like I said, 99% of that now is kind of moot, and really we're only tracking 2 numbers now.
Supervisor Levnino through the chair. Yes, so on our surveillance metrics, we are tracking case rates by day as well as testing positivity. However, it might be a little bit difficult to find given all the other information that we do have on there. So the team will work on elevating and moving those 2 metrics to the forefront. And I know that the comps team is also going to be assisting us in launching the rainbow charts as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to suggest that the charts that you have that you made in the presentation are they're very helpful, and maybe those or some semblance of those on the website would also be helpful.
We will do that. Thanks.
Supervisor Williams?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, excuse me, Supervisor Adam?
Supervisor Williams, go first if you liked.
Sure, I just wanted to make a request that, if you know this information, do it today, but on a further basis that would provide a little bit more information, because there's a number of COVID-related bills that came out of the legislature and have been signed to the governor. I would just highlight 2 that would be really relevant for our business outreach, which is AB 685, which is the requirement to disclose to employees if there's been an exposure at a work site. And then the SB 1159, which is the clarification that anybody that got COVID qualifies for workers' comp. And I just think that particularly the first one is really important to get out there through our RISE outreach. We have a methodology to promulgate that information.
Supervisor Adam?
Okay, good deal. Dr. Dorinoso, before we're done here today, I would like you to produce 2 lists for me. And you guys might want to write this down because it's a little wordy. First, a list of specific public COVID complaints in our district, including the source and how it was conveyed or received. Can you get that for me?
I believe that our EOC is tracking that information. And so,
Okay,
yes.
so you'll be able to get that to me today before we're done?
Yes.
Okay, good deal, thank you. Also, please produce the dates when school waiver applications were submitted to you, Public Health, and when you forwarded those applications to the state Public Health, and the dates that they were approved, and the current status on all of those. Can you give me that?
I can give you that, but I'm probably not sure where my team is at. So if I could have till the end of the day, I will email that to you.
Yeah, and maybe we could just trail this item, and you can come back and make sure I have that information.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Guzani?
And we'll also work with Public Health to see if any portions of the first question are actually confidential or promise confidentiality during the reporting process. I just don't have that off the top of my head, and we'd like to work with Public Health on that before making that a publicly available document.
And just, this is the CEO Miyasato. That information is being tracked by EOC and our code enforcement group. So we will have Ms. Hubbard look to see what information she has and clear it with County Council.
Well, I think this is a really significant day. We have our first red report card from the state of California, and that is a very, very big deal. It's the headline. Santa Barbara County is now in the red tier. And as a result, if we can...
We're still in the purple tier. We're still in the purple tier.
We're still officially in the purple tier, and it'll
Correct.
take 2 more weeks to get to the red tier, but
Correct.
to officially graduate
Correct.
to the red tier. But we are, for the first time, we have a report
Yes.
card that shows red. So we are making significant progress. And if we keep that up and sustain that in 2 more weeks, houses of worship will be able to open indoors with limited capacity. Movie theaters will be able to open indoors with 25% capacity. Restaurants will also be able to open indoors. Gyms, nail salons, massage services, all can open indoors. Museums, there's a lot of things that are more accessible in the red tier than in the purple tier. So this is really, really important good news. And the chart that you show that shows the very steady decline over time is a reflection on our collective efforts to do the simple things like wearing masks and staying away from others and washing your hands. And it's working. So thank you for sharing that good news. Are there other comments or questions from board members?
Yes,
Lavanino has one.
Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you. Good points. Question is, so let's run that out a little bit, and we do go to the red, and those things happen. So what happens at what point? How long? If we open up when we start seeing, the numbers go back, how long? I mean, how does that process work? So, I just want to be clear to people that if we do open these things up and cases go up, like how long do we get to stay in the red before if we had to go back to purple, or does it work that way, or how does all that work once you hit a tier?
So, I'll just give you the whole context. So a county needs to be in a tier for 3 weeks before moving to a less restrictive tier. So within those 3 weeks, there needs to be 2 consecutive weeks of metrics showing less restrictive tier before moving into that tier. So we've gotten 1 week in the red, so we need another week of meeting the red metrics before we're officially given that designation. Once we've moved into a less restrictive tier, businesses can open accordingly to the sector guidelines posted online as soon as it is allowed by the local jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions have decided to wait a bit longer. And if you have moved into a more restrictive tier after 2 weeks of being bumped back, then the counties will have 3 days to implement the more restrictive sector guidelines in that more restrictive tier.
Okay, I guess that's clear. As long as you understand it, it's very confusing, but it is good news. We're trending in the right direction. So let's just, I guess, concentrate on that. We'll deal with the other when we get there.
Right, just as we are getting a status update about us trending towards the red tier, once we are in the red tier and we are not vigilant and our cases increase, our testing positively increase, and we then meet the criteria to be moved back to the purple tier, we will be warned. So that will be, it won't be from a week to a week. We will be forewarned with that metric assignment each Tuesday.
Supervisor Williams.
Well, number one, I want to agree with the chair that this is momentous and really important. But I guess my feeling is let's not blow it. We need to continue a level of vigilance. Both we as the county and the public need to continue a level of vigilance to ensure that this positive trend continues. We not only need to meet these metrics for 2 weeks, but we also need to meet the draft equity metric if it ever comes out. And I would counsel that on reopening on the things that we are allowed to reopening in the red, that we would that you guys would work on a timeline and stagger the different sectors. For two reasons. Number one is if things, by staggering, we can better ascertain whether there's a negative trend associated with any particular reopening. And of course, by providing a timeline, then you can provide the timetable by which those businesses can take the necessary steps in advance to do it right.
Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you. Just want to remind everybody, it's time to get flu shots. And they have similar symptoms, and so we want to rule that out. Is the same reopening, and if we go up, closing down again, that applies to other sectors? Does that apply to schools as well?
No, it does not apply to schools. So once schools are reopened, they can be opened.
And I guess I'd just offer a slightly different view from Supervisor Williams. I think that other counties that have opened, the additional businesses that come from moving from the purple tier to the red tier, and even some counties that have moved now to the orange tier, have demonstrated what the effects of that are sufficiently in my mind, and that I would hope that we would open up the businesses that would have the capacity to open under the new tiers, as soon as that's possible. So we have a slightly different view about that. Is there any other questions for staff?
Gyms?
I believe gyms is in the red tier, but at, so if I may add to Chair Hart's comments, in the sectors that can be opened in the red tier, if we look at them, they are very thoughtfully designed with very slow measured reopening. Some are at 25%, some are at 50%, but they are very measured just so that we can have that slow reopening and assessment.
Okay, thank you for the reports, Mr. Gazzoni. I'm Dr. Joe Reynoso. That concludes this item, or are we going to trail this item? I thought there was something from Supervisor Adam. He asked.
Yeah, that would be most excellent if we could do that and make sure that we get those answers
Okay,
today.
we will trail this item.
Thank you.
Till later in the day, which now